Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. Welcome to Web3 Warriors, episode 102, featuring Canaan Linder, the founder and CEO of Stardust, which is a Web3 wallets as a service gaming business. Welcome, Canaan. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me. Doing great. How about yourself?
Awesome. I'm doing good too. I know you just jumped off a Twitter space, so I appreciate you being able to jump over here and join us. Glad you're doing well.
Yeah, they never end, do they? But always good.
It's an important part of the Web3 space, you know, as much as Twitter gets crazy, I think we all still just have the main central spot to hang out, right? And you're joining us from San Fran, I believe?
Yes, sir. Bay Area, born and raised, been here all our lives, and this is where Stardust headquarters are.
Nice, nice. Well, I really appreciate you joining the show. So welcome everyone to the show. I'm David Chroma, go by Chrome in the metaverse. And here on Web3 Warriors today, we're going to be looking at a favorite topic of ours, which is Web3 gaming and the potential that really the crypto and the blockchain brings into the gaming space. You know, I've often said in past episodes that a lot of what brought me, or really what hooked me onto NFTs, is the gaming aspect, right? So I have a bit of a gaming background. I've always been very interested in the digital space, and when I realized how NFTs are basically programmable assets that actually have real world value attached to them through cryptocurrency, and I realized how that kind of translates into 3D assets within a gaming space, whether it's in the metaverse or whether it's in an actual video game, my mind was just blown, really. And that's kind of what really kind of hooked me in initially. I will say I stuck around for the art, because I also realized that being able to buy art on chain and being able to support artists directly through peer-to-peer purchasing of their art and seeing how that kind of reverberates within their community, within their families, definitely is what really hooked me into the NFT space and into the technology. But I've always said, I'm here for the gaming, I'm here for the metaverse. And so we're really looking forward to kind of hearing from Stardust, which is a really successful business. I believe they just raised around $35 million in fundraising and venture capital funds. So that's really exciting. So I really look forward to hearing how they're kind of tackling the issue of Web3 gaming. And there are kind of a myriad of criticisms on one hand, a lot of FUD that faces all things crypto, right, on another hand. So really looking forward to getting into that. So before we dive into the interview with Canaan, I just want to speak a little bit about some of the issues that I've seen in the Web3 gaming space, and specifically, how we maybe move from here, right? So it looks like a lot of the gamers in the space, for whatever reason, don't really share my sentiment when it comes to being fascinated with taking real world value and bringing it into the digital world and being able to buy and sell digital assets, create your own digital assets and sell them in the game for, again, cryptocurrency, which then can be easily kind of off-ramped into your local fiat and actually have real world value, right? And so some of the main reasons for, I think, the opposition to this idea is that there is a concern around the idea that games are going to become less intrinsically valuable, which is to say, just for the fun and for the community and the connections with other gamers, and more for let's go make money in the video game, right? And so does that kind of dilute the fun of the game? Does it kind of contrast against, the other kind of reasons for people to play video games? I don't necessarily see it that way. I think from a business perspective, there are a lot of amazing creators in the gaming space that are not seeing, the full value of what they're creating. And now with blockchain, with crypto, you're going to have this opportunity to actually monetize your creativity a lot more and not relying on, a centralized gaming company or developer, but actually being able to just go direct peer-to-peer through this kind of shared ecosystem of the blockchain and in the gaming world. So I think it's really exciting, but I do understand that there are those who don't want more money in gaming, or they don't want more monetizing in the gaming space. And then, as I mentioned, also, there is just the standard kind of fear, uncertainty, and doubt around crypto, right? And the idea that we should not be embracing crypto or accepting it. Although, just this week we saw the SEC approving the Ethereum ETF, right? We had the Bitcoin ETF earlier. So it's looking like even the regulators are slowly getting in line and, embracing the crypto. So maybe some of that FUD will be dissipating a little bit. But I think those are the kind of the big hurdles that we've seen in the space. On the show here, we've talked about Dookie Dash from the Bored Apes. We've talked about Star Atlas on the Solana blockchain. We've looked at Unioverse and Shrapnel, and really just looked at some different kind of concepts of Web3 games. Some are at different stages of development and readiness, and I think that's another big kind of hurdle, is that the development continues to kind of trudge along, and there's not many super exciting fun games out there yet that people can really sink their teeth into. But I will give a shout out to Shrapnel, because they seem to be doing some pretty cool things, and I know Stardust is also connected to them. So with all of that, I'll digress and really want to turn things over to Canaan and get a sense of what they're building over at Stardust, and really hopefully get some solutions around how we can continue to grow the Web3 gaming space and kind of push back against some of the sentiments that's opposing it right now. So with that, Canaan, thank you again for joining. Really appreciate you being here. Could you share maybe a little bit about your backstory and what brought you to blockchain before we kind of dive into the Stardust conversation?
Of course, and thank you for having me on the show today. So my background as a software engineer, I grew up in the Bay Area. I was a software engineer at Bloomberg in New York City, and Stardust is actually today 6 years and 1 day old. So
Oh,
we've
there you
been
go.
around quite a while. Yeah, thank you. And I actually started Stardust because I came across CryptoKitties, and I said these digital cats are awesome, right? They were just digital cats. They were really cute, but they represented so much more. This intangible, tangible ownership that you have in a digital world, right? Something between the nothing you have today on the internet with the physicalness of a collectible card. And the backstory of Stardust, I digress, but I played Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitively, Stardust Dragon being my favorite card. And so Stardust Cards Corporation, or now known as Stardust, was created to help game developers integrate this new dimension of ownership into their games. And really, over the past 6 years and 1 day, our mission has been to make game developers successful in Web3. And it's everything from the infrastructure and wallets to help them scale their games to millions of players on blockchain, all the way through to user acquisition, helping them acquire millions of players to play their games. And we've seen the ups, the downs, the sideways, everything that's come in the last 3, 4 cycles since we've been around as a business. But we're finally seeing today much of the quality that we've seen in the Web2 space start to become what the Web3 space is all about. Great game developers that started 2 years ago during the last bull market. You mentioned many of them, Midnight Society, Azure Games, Infinigas, many of the other great Web2 developers we've seen, Nine Heroes come into the Web3 space, are now starting to launch their games. And it's a very exciting time. It's a very exciting market. It's a very exciting time to be, interested in ETFs on blockchain. And so overall, really excited for where we are and of course, where we're going to be.
Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations. Happy birthday, Stardust. 6 years
Cheers,
in one
thank you.
day. Wow. So that must be quite the slog. So you're saying 2 or 3 kind of cycles that you've been through now, and CryptoKitties kind of being an inspiration for you. And speak a little bit more to that collector card side of things, right? So how do you see, or how have you kind of viewed that evolution so far? Because you see a CryptoKitties, there are certain projects here and there that had a bit of a gaming aspect to them, but they were also kind of just like farm games, right?
Yep.
So how can you explain just kind of how we evolved to where we're at now, and what are you most excited about?
It's a great question. And you had you had Farmville and Web2, right? So you've had your farming
Right.
games and they always scale. And I think a lot of people look very myopically and cross-sectionally at where we are today and don't understand that this is a path that is going to take us to places we don't even know yet. And so it's really all about innovation and what blockchain technology can do for games. And whether you're enamored by the games we have in the industry today or not, you have to understand that blockchain technology is revolutionary as it comes applied to game design and to true ownership. And where we will be is going to be an incredible place that everybody should be bullish for. That being said, we've been through a couple cycles, and every cycle comes with a different theme, I will say, especially as it applies to the gaming market. And so when we started 2017, 2018, a lot of the first ICO bubble, the first speculation bubble, it was really all about financial incentives in games and developers and community ownership and all this great stuff and a couple NFTs. But frankly, there were no games on blockchain. It was like it was going to be an influx of Web2 games. Honestly, during that cycle, never really happened.
Right.
Then we come to years 2020, 2021, the NFT cycle, shall you say. And this was all about having your 1,000 true fans. And this was actually corresponded with an article Chris Dixon wrote, which was an update to a very old kind of true fans article. He wrote it in the context again of Web3. And now people who participated in your NFT sale were your 1,000 true fans, and they were the ones who were going to back you till the end of time. And while I love that article and thought it was an incredibly well written one, and everybody should go read it if you haven't, it gave games an interesting thought process, which was when we'd approach them at Stardust and say, hey, we have the scalable wallets for all of your games and the ability to get more users, they said, I got my 1,000 true fans. I'm not interested, right? And so mainstream adoption this last cycle was actually not really a torch carried by many of the game developers who were actually releasing games last cycle. Because there were more native Web3 developers, didn't really come from the Web2 world back then, and were really focused on intra-blockchain games, right? Not kind of games, but very, very focused Web3 games. I want to touch and feel the blockchain. This cycle is a little different. This cycle is when we have actual Web2 developers who started last cycle launching Web2, Web3 based games, and we're now looking at millions of players on blockchain. And so that's this type of ramp and I think consumer and of course developer behavior that we're trending towards. And if not this cycle, next cycle, most definitely, we're easily going to hit hundreds of millions of players playing blockchain-based games.
Wow, that's exciting. No, I'm definitely here for that. Hope that we do reach that sooner rather than later. But I'm curious, when looking at kind of the wallets as a service option then, right? So to your point, wanting to touch and feel the blockchain in the CryptoKitties or some of these other ones, and now getting a little bit away from that, like even a Shrapnel has a kind of Call of Duty vibe to it, right? It's very much like trying to make it AAA, like have fun. And then, there happens to be a blockchain component. So can you speak to that evolution? And I guess let's hammer out on exactly what is the wallets as a service kind of concept that you're pitching.
Of course, in gaming in general is a very copy pasta industry, for want of a much better term. Game developers figure out what works. It could be, your, Fruit Ninja, Flappy Bird, tapper, left swipe, right? It could be the same controls. And what game developers have discovered, and this is rather obvious, but I'm still going to say it, is that the less barriers to entry for users when they're playing a game, the better. And blockchain is probably one of the biggest bats you can swing and hit somebody in the face when it comes to a barrier to entry, especially if they've never used it before. My grandmother, who plays Candy Crush, is not going to set up a MetaMask wallet. I'm sorry for all you Web3 maxis out there. It's not going to happen, right? And if we want, people all across the board, right, technically savvy, not technically savvy, to join the blockchain world and become part of this broader economy, we have to give them the ability to do so. And so when it comes to wallets as a service and how Shrapnel leverages us, every time a player logs into Shrapnel, creates a game, earns a skin in future, buys a skin, a gamer tag, whatever it is, that actually behind the scenes, they've been provisioned a blockchain wallet through Stardust. And then that item is seamlessly transferred and minted into that wallet. Player doesn't need to know what blockchain is. They don't need to know it even exists. But what they can do is they still can connect their MetaMask, play with their self-custodial items, take their items from their Shrapnel wallet built with Stardust into their own self-custodial wallet. And that optionality is something that we want to extend to every game. There are different cohorts of players, some who roam around the internet with their MetaMask or Ledger. There's some that won't even know they're on blockchain, and that's fine. But what Wallets as a Service does is it opens up the top of funnel for game developers to attract those Web2 players into Web3 without any barrier to entry, so we can finally reach the billion players playing blockchain-based games that we all know the future holds.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing, and it's interesting because I think about the custodial wallet conversation from an art perspective, right? And I look at some platforms, I won't name any, but who have used the custodial angle and kind of with that reasoning, right? The same kind of mentality of like, well, we want your average art collector to come here and buy something with a credit card and just know that they bought it and they have this digital art piece and we'll hold it for them on our platform. And now, unfortunately, if that platform goes under for whatever reason and can't pay the bills, that whole custodial wallet network also goes down with it, right? And so what we've seen happen in some cases is people actually lost the art that they paid for in that custodial wallet. Now, if they would have transferred it to their Web3 wallet, to their MetaMask prior to the platform shutting down, obviously they would still have the assets. So there is that option at least where you could save your assets despite the platform or the game in this instant kind of going under, right? Now, to your point on the gaming side of things, someone playing Candy Crush who has zero interest in blockchain. On the art side, having true ownership of the revenue from it, as well as the actual digital asset, is incredibly important. On the gaming side, I do feel that it is a bit less important. And to your point about like, there are those who will want to really touch and feel the blockchain and feel like they're, you know, playing the game right on the blockchain, right, with shrapnel or whatever. But they have that option to connect their MetaMask and have that experience, right? But for the other thousands of those who just think it's a cool looking game and want to try it out, they don't necessarily need to understand the custodial piece. My question from the Web3 side of it, how do you handle the kind of conversation around the potential of losing the assets in your custodial wallet? Would that just be kind of viewed the same way you would lose an asset in Fortnite, for example, or whatever the case might be? Like, how do you navigate the custodial wallet conversation? Because I do think it is quite different in the gaming context compared to the art context.
100%. And I'll take it from two different perspectives. The first is it's a great reason why the wallet provider needs to be separated from the game or the app itself. If you look at Stripe, it's a perfect example. Stripe supports the biggest apps today, right? Uber, DoorDash, Shopify, with the financial backing of effectively a bank account. Small bank account for every single player in game, right? Or a user in the app or person ordering DoorDash. And of course, you don't set up a bank account when you try and order DoorDash, right? Stripe facilitates that payment for you. And that difference means that Stardust is a business, and of course, we've raised a good amount of money, have a great amount of backing, and support some of the largest games in Web3. We make that decision risk off for game developers, because a game developer, you don't want to have them constantly in fear that, oh my gosh, if my game doesn't work out, my community is plumb out of luck. And that's actually an incredible way for us to partner with game developers so we can give them that secure backing and peace of mind that their players are not going to get rugged, even if the game doesn't function, right? Because Stardust still holds those items. And of course, it's on the game developers to work with us to make sure their players can withdraw. But if the game developer has a catastrophic crash, something happens, they can't pay their server bill anymore. Luckily, Stardust is that secure backing so that all the users' funds and art are safe. The second thing I'll say is that Stardust as a wallet provider has a unique perspective on how we take on legal compliance, both here in the US and abroad. A lot of the wallet providers you see today just say, we put private keys in 3 different places called MPC, and that makes us compliant. And unfortunately, that's not true. To hold money, to transmit money, to hold wealth on behalf of people within the United States or abroad, you have to be registered as a money services business, have your money transmitter licenses. In Korea, you have VASP. In Europe, you just saw MiCA get passed as a set of rules, MiCA, one of those two. We subscribe to that theory that wallet providers have to be, secure and compliant. And we are far ahead of the curve on that. The last thing I'll mention there is that the FBI has recently shut down quite a few wallets for not being registered money services business or money transmitters, but acting as such. And so we not only provide that security for game developers and apps built on Stardust, but that legal compliance that they drastically need as well, and holds us to a higher standard than us just saying, sorry guys, all your items are lost.
Amazing. Now I'm starting to see why you got that funding. You really got the positioning in the market quite well. So looking at that regulatory side, right, and good point around the money service businesses. I'm up here in Canada, where our money service business license is becoming more and more popular for crypto platforms and other even remittances and digital payment options. So I'm very well versed in it. I work in fintech in my day job. So yeah, it's very cool that you definitely are well aware of the compliance piece. And I think to your point, in gaming, in any industry where you're really looking to build out for the long term, and if you especially want to be that fail-safe, be that backdrop for any company or any platform that actually does go belly up, that you still have their assets secure and the assets of their customers secure, is amazing. Like, that service alone separates you probably from a lot of other custodial options, right?
100%. And we talk about Web3 games, and Web3 games do have high bars, like the Shrapnels and the Midnight Societies of the world. Like, their bars are high, as high as they get. But we do work with public companies as well. if you look at Stillfront, a public company in Sweden, Tilting Point, 50 million monthly active users, raised $250 million from General Atlantic. These are the largest Web2 publishers. And we also have to remember that if we ever do want Unity or Epic Games in the space, we have to provide them a platform and an infrastructure they feel comfortable with. And so from a Stardust perspective, it's also something that we're keenly aware of, because we're not going to get to $1 billion, a billion players just having the wild west of crypto, right? We do have to have some reality, right, to our shall we say hooliganism, and
you got to rein in those degens.
exactly. It's nice to move fast and break things, which is always true, and we do as well. But on the other side, you have to take into account the laws, because they do exist for a reason, and whether we like them or not, they're there to protect consumers.
Awesome. I'm sure your regulatory oversight are happy to hear things like that from a company like yours. That's quite impressive. Awesome. So I'm curious, on the kind of nerdy side of things, how is Stardust functioning from a kind of basic blockchain level? Are you running on Ethereum L2? What blockchain are you kind of most running on, or are you pretty agnostic across different blockchains, or how are you kind of tackling the actual nuts and bolts of the on-chain dynamics?
Sure. So our wallets as a service product actually supports almost every blockchain out there today. So any EVM chain that could be an L1, an L2, an L3, I've heard rumors of L4s, or an L0, right? Wow. Whichever L plus or minus one direction you want to go with an EVM that's fully supported. Solana, Sui, Aptos. We even support Bitcoin ordinals as an interesting matter of fact.
Sheesh.
Games wanted it, and game success is our success. And so, top priority immediately. So we're pretty agnostic, and being an agnostic wallet provider also means that when you create a wallet on Stardust, it's actually a smart wallet. It contains addresses for every single chain, right? Both all EVMs, Aptos, Sui, Solana, and Bitcoin. And so what happens is we actually have games who are doing collections on multiple chains. It really widens their partnership base. They can do an ERC, a ERC20 on Ethereum, which gives them a huge amount of liquidity in that exchange integration. But they can go do a partnership with Solana for NFTs, or Tensor, Magic Eden Launchpad, to really get insight and viewership from their community base. And so it's something we've seen and really wanted to extend to game developers, because this is not a one-chain world, and no chain is a one-chain game. And so through our wallets, we've really seen that come to be, and are excited to support that next level of growth.
That is super exciting. I heard you mention Sui. That's one I'm kind of ignorant on. I'd love if you could just give a little bit of I know you're not here to speak for Sui, but how does Sui kind of differentiate from a Solana or an L2 on Ethereum? As I know, they're definitely leaning heavily into the gamer space, right?
Sure. Yes, totally. And Sui is a great partner of ours, and truly does understand gaming well. Awesome. One of the unique things about Sui is compared to, I guess, EVM and Solana, the other two you mentioned, is everybody has a different language and how they write smart contracts, and different virtual machines. And so EVM is Ethereum virtual machine, right? And you have Solana with their SVM, Solana virtual machine, that runs Rust versus Solidity. Mm-hmm. And then on Sui, you have the Move VM, which is, language is written in Move, and they all have their different benefits and costs. Sui is very high performant. Solana, very high performance as well. EVM getting more performant, and they all scale in different ways. I think it remains to be seen, based upon where the blockchain ecosystem goes, which network effect will grow fastest, and if these will all exist, or one will, or we'll even have more in the future that are different styles. I liken these blockchains to operating systems. When you spin up a server for your business, there are 15 different flavors of Linux, right? You can run Windows if you're a desktop consumer app, right? There's Ubuntu, there's 15 levels of Fedora and Red Hat and all of these others. And so, from a blockchain perspective, I see it functioning in the same exact way. Some are more secure, some are more compliant, some are faster, some are cheaper, more expensive. There are pros and cons to each, but each game and each economy, in every way, in any way they're looking to integrate blockchain, we really focus on what they want to do and which chain is best for them. Sui, Solana, EVM, they work differently for different developers, and they all have their benefits and costs for every game.
Amazing, amazing. Wow, very well versed. So, like looking at the cost kind of angle, right? So, I think what I've heard for Solana, for example, their cost per transaction is quite a bit lower and their speed is quite a bit higher. Although, with their kind of explosion of meme coins on the network, I've heard that their whole network congestion is now an issue, right? And I know that even the Bitcoin network has been experiencing a bit of that as well with all of the ordinals and inscriptions. You know, Ethereum, we all know the gas war and the idea of, you know, having relatively high gas fees, but the L2s or L3s are trying to solve for that, right? Is there, do you have a preference, or maybe that's not the right way to put it, but is there one that's kind of slowly becoming kind of the Windows, if we're going with the operating system kind of analogy? Is there one that you see kind of really providing the best nuts and bolts for gaming specifically, or do you think it will always be like, just really depends on what your game wants to execute and, you know, what your costs are essentially?
Yeah, I truly do believe that. You know, I'll liken it, and I think the easiest example I can give is like, what app should you list your restaurant on? Uber Eats or DoorDash, right? And then that's kind of the same thing as like, what chain should you build on, right? Some have higher fees, some have lower fees. They both have different viewerships. Both people have them, you know, downloaded on their phones. You may want to look at in your area, right? You know, that you're targeting for your game or for your restaurant, which has more people downloaded the app, right? Or, you know, if you're in Southeast Asia, where are those players really wanting to play games? It seems like Ronin is a great fit for that right now, right? If you're more of a, you know, digging into the meme coin hype, right? That sounds more like a Solana, right? If you're more on the maybe vanilla scalability, security train, right? Maybe that's Ethereum, even L1 for a mint. And so, you know, I think, again, everyone has their pros and cons, and I don't think that there's a one size fits all at all. Now, what I will say, and going back to gaming, some games want to be specific games and they need user acquisition. Other games have great user acquisition and they want to be publishers. So they want to do partnerships with multiple games. And, you know, that may be done on their own ecosystem, like an L3, right? Or a Polygon CDK or an Avalanche subnet. And so, you know, there are many, you know, ways to fit yourselves into each chains, but we take a list of kind of what game developers want. And then it's, you know, kind of like the, you know, sketch. You hold it over each chain and you say, which one best fits my needs? And it's not one size fits all, but different for everybody.
Awesome, awesome. I would have thought otherwise, but I like where you're coming from, and you clearly have a lot more experience in the space than I do. I remember when Solana launched, for example, right, and much was made about the fact that they're using Rust as the programming language, on top of the fact, of course, that they have lower fees and faster transaction speeds, and so there was a very big narrative out there around Solana being able to support like really high quality AAA games because Rust is the same programming language that I believe Unreal uses, right? And so that they would have more support for the Unreal Engine, which is the engine used for really high level computer graphics in pretty much all of the best video games, right? So I was kind of, as a gamer, coming with this mentality of, all right, Solana's coming here to really shake things up and kind of provide that platform that is going to be the go-to kind of blockchain option for gamers and for video game developers. Now, you know, 2-3 years later from that narrative kind of being out there, Star Atlas is kind of the only one I see that's very impressive, that is really kind of like continuing to push forward, and even that is not really like live ready for, you know, full gameplay, but the graphics are awesome, and I think that they have a really cool community and ecosystem they're building out. But yeah, I guess I'll just, what do you say about the programming language piece, and is that Rust conversation relevant, or, you know, does that matter as much?
It definitely is. And then, by the way, I think Nyan was another successful launch on Solana, Nine Heroes, that came recently. Great shooter. If you suggest everybody check it out. Yeah, it's you know, Rust is an awesome programming language. Having learned Solidity and Rust and Move and Cadence actually on Flow and all these others, I do really like Rust. It's awesome. Now, what I'll say, which is interesting, is most game engines are written in, you know, C, C++, C#, .NET, some derivative of that, which actually looks a little bit more like Solidity many times than it does Rust. That being said, right, from kind of the developer perspective, like every game studio is going to make a best decision fit for them. And you never know. Maybe like the blockchain team they hired doesn't know Rust. They know Solidity, right? Because more developers and there are more resources for Solidity out there. Others know Rust, others know Move. And so everybody kind of comes at it with this like esoteric, myopic view of like, well, like this language is better, and you're probably right. But at the end of the day, like as businesses, you'd be surprised on it's like, we went with this blockchain because, this language is something our developers knew. Yeah. So it's the proliferation will catch on, but it's crazy. Or this blockchain gave us a grant. I mean, you really see it all.
That for sure.
There are a million factors, and there's never one thing. But yeah, Solana, Rust is incredible, and a lot of people see the congestion on their chains as negative. I see it as a net positive. Holy crap! The fact that a chain that's that performing can get congested, props to Solana. They did something no one else has been able to do, and you got to give them credit for it.
And to your earlier point about, running fast and breaking things, sometimes you just got to do that. You got to move fast and work with it as you go, right? And
it's fun to pump. Yeah, there you go. Pumped up fun, baby.
Pumped up fun, getting into a little bit of trouble over there. But that's exciting. And I don't know where these things are really evolving to your point, I think there's just so many different variables at play right now. Do you have any concerns around the broader congestion conversation looking at gaming? Especially, I think Bitcoin is another example where, from my perspective, I think the whole currency conversation's kind of gone out the window now, not just because of all the ETF and investment talk and digital gold, but the degens have basically broken it. Like it's not, you can't really send money on Bitcoin the way that they were kind of talking about you doing it, 5 years ago or so because of the congestion, right? Do you think that gamers are going to be congesting these networks further, and is that going to be okay? How do you kind of tackle that network congestion criticism from the non-gamers in Web3?
Totally. And I mean, Bitcoin maybe is digital gold because it's not like I pick up a gold bar that I have, and then walk around with it and trade it. So maybe it is digital gold. It's too heavy and too congested to ever trade with, but I'm just holding it for the memes, right? And for a number go up, why not? And ETF, please.
Of course.
But it's funny you mention that because I would say there are different schools of thought on how you scale chains. If you go to the Ethereum school of thought, it's really about, shall we say, a scaling pyramid where Ethereum sits at the top is, a provable layer. Then you have L2s, you potentially have L3s, but you're kind of going to get this web ecosystem. And if you, and there are different protocols to connect all of them. And they do have the hindsight of the internet on their side, right? Which is a bunch of disparate servers, disparate compute layers that fractionalize liquidity across them, and then interconnect for the HTTP and TCP of the internet. And so, that is one school of thought. And blockchain gets a little bit more difficult because we haven't figured out liquidity layer, right? As soon as you split into different L3s or L2s, you not only fractionalize liquidity, you fractionalize identity. You have all these wallets across all these chains. It's not fun. But that's one kind of school of scaling thought. The other side is through the VM itself and making these much more performant chains, right? And so Solana, Aptos, Sui, you see these different ones come along and you say, look, I can do 1 million transactions, right? Ethereum can do 10. Use my chain. Right. And it's not bad, right? I mean, you do see validity there. What I will say is that if you look at AWS, right? AWS doesn't run a single machine for the whole internet. They don't go every 2 years and replace the processor with one twice as fast and say, now the internet is twice more capacity. And so I think there's a little bit of, MXN, two-dimensional scaling here. One in which you have the operating system that is super performant, but then you have the number of operating systems that are run, right? And that, and so you really have to align with how many computers and servers there are versus how fast do the servers run, right? Horizontal versus vertical scalability. And I think different ecosystems have different takes on it. Different ecosystems are at different stages because of how fast their VMs run of needing to scale into multiple machines. Right. But I think we're all going to converge on something that works for everybody. And different VMs may exist in the Ethereum world, and the Ethereum world of this pyramid scalability may exist exist in other worlds as well. And so only time will tell.
No doubt, no doubt. And so do you think that this essentially comes down to being a debate between decentralization or how decentralized you get, right? Because I feel like, a Sui and a Solana, all these guys are always going to say they are a decentralized cryptocurrency still, and maybe they do have, a decent number of nodes, but to your point, it really pales in comparison to an Ethereum or something like that, where you do have a very, very decentralized and widespread global network of nodes, as opposed to Solana or Sui, where it's a much more concentrated kind of system, to your point. And do you think that impacts the whole immutability question, right? So I think when you have NFTs and tokens and assets on Ethereum, you have a much more stronger case for immutability as opposed to maybe a Solana. I don't know if Sui's even really going for an immutability pitch, but definitely I see a lot of NFTs being sold on Solana, and I have collected quite a few NFTs on Solana, so I'm hoping they are immutable and that they are here for the long term. But I hear many criticisms from my Bitcoin and Ethereum friends who don't necessarily love Solana. What do you think about that whole immutability question, and then decentralization versus performance, essentially, right?
Yeah, I ping pong a lot on this one. At the end of the day, standardization and should we be immutable or not, it's a qualitative question that, like, the wins of, shall we say, crypto Twitter differ on day to day. I think in times of maximalism, during bear markets, people like immutability, right? It's kind of what they rest their laurels on, say, we're great, we're better, right, than everybody else. But in times of economic expansion during bull markets, people are like, how do I collect the best art on the best chain that's going to go up the most, right? And so that looks the coolest, that I want long term. And so, I think what's so interesting in gaming specifically is all about different cohorts, right? You have your cohort of people who play once a day. You have your cohort of people who play every day, all day. Some watch ads, some buy things in game. Some want to play to earn, all this stuff. And I separate collectors as another dimension of that cohort in terms of they're the ones that are subdivided within it. There are collectors who just want pretty art. They don't care if it's mutable or not. They're not worried. They don't stay up at night worrying about that stuff. Others who want it in their ledger, under their bed, saving millions of dollars in it, and they're crypto punk, right? And that becomes their identity. And so I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I think there's a spectrum of how you think about it. And at the end of the day, I think transparency is the key. Right? No matter what you are, whether you can mutate it, whether you can't mutate it, whether the assets can be lost or not, that's what transparency is all about. And that's what I think blockchain does very well in all cases. You can see, and it's transparent and provable, how mutable your item is. And I suggest consumers who are more savvy understand that.
Amazing. Yeah, no, I agree. And to your point, I think transparency and accountability are more important than immutability, frankly. But there are those, to your point, especially in the bear markets, and when you get into the maximal corners or the maximalists, the ETH maxis and the Bitcoin maxis, it's all about decentralization or die.
Yeah, totally. And I will say the irony is that immutability, great, right? NFTs and gaming, immutability, not so great. There are instances, of course, where your Mewtwo should not be mutable, but think of any game anyone's ever played and leveled up, right? There is no immutability there. Right. And so there's I think there's a push and pull sometimes with NFTs, right? Collectors, gaming, et cetera, but up to the community. Transparency wins.
Yeah, for sure. Transparency for the win, 100%. That does take me to the idea of dynamic NFTs, which I think are obviously going to play a fairly important role in the gaming space, right? And the idea that, sure, that token can be immutable, but that doesn't mean it can't change into the future, right? And that not only can it change, but maybe it changes dependent on specific variables, whether it's the time of the year or day or something that happens on chain that sends a message, and how are you tackling the dynamic NFTs conversation? Is it something that Stardust is actively working on or already kind of rolling out with certain projects? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's definitely something we support within our wallets. I think different chains handle mutability, immutability, dynamicism differently, right? Ethereum, different, Solana different, and Sui even, has a huge push for their dynamic NFT standard, very different as well. We love to focus on, actually, while it's dynamic NFTs, added functionality to NFTs. You see the ERC 721C standard enforcing royalties, allowing for broader liquidity around many different marketplaces, OpenSea, Magic Eden, many people adapting for that on EVM-based chains. Something I'm really bullish on is growing up, I would always take a baseball, go to spring training, try and get as many signatures as possible. Unfortunately, never got Barry Bonds. I got really close though. But right? You've never had cryptographically signed digital goods and secure. And what I mean by that is like, I was playing Fortnite one day and then, watching some Ninja. This was a couple of years ago. And thought to myself, whoa, wait. With blockchain technology and these additive and dynamic NFTs, Ninja could actually sign my Fortnite skin. And that is when it really clicked for me. The ability for myself to take something that was in the digital world that I really valued, not as a physical world, not as much anymore, a signature on a baseball, and apply it to digital NFTs. And so it's something we love to support. It's something we do now. And it's something we love to push the boundaries of how people think around what kind of composability and different paradigms NFTs can be. Because I don't know about you, but like, damn, if Ninja signed my Fortnite skin, I'd pay like a lot of money for that right now.
Nice.
So just saying, if Ninja's out there and watching this, please sign my NFT.
Let's go. Shouting out the streamers. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Fortnite as well. That's awesome. So you think in a scenario like that, you could actually digitally sign the wearable and it shows up as like a new, like the little digital signature is somewhere on the wearable and that's it. And you have it forevermore. And that's the new version of the wearable essentially, right?
100%.
And it could be like only 5 people get that kind of thing. And it's worth thousands of dollars or whatever.
Token gated. I mean, look at Nike with Artifact that they bought, right? And the ability to buy like some super rare pair of like Jordans or Yeezys or whatever it is, and get that digital representative, and then go leverage that in a digital world and have that as a digital collectible. Like that is just. It's really awesome. It's really awesome. And we haven't even scratched the surface with it yet. So only time is going to tell. I was just
about to say, we barely even started. I feel like it's just the wherewithal to understand why that's valuable and then to actually, have the incentive to go get it. I think we're still just starting out. Like people like you and I are kind of right there wanting to have all the technology right available and you're building it out. So it's super exciting, but yeah,
100%.
Amazing.
And in different generations, of people think about this differently. Like if you grew up with physical collectibles and you prize physical collectibles, like, that generation is a little bit, and like physical art, digital collectibles, right? But, as we see, kids growing up today, TikTok, like, live stream, all this cool stuff, right? Like they're in a different world and that world is much, much more, has a higher affinity to these digital collectibles. So not only do we have the tailwind of these nice ETFs being approved and the technology improving and games coming out, but also a new generation of individuals who prize digital collectibles much more than they do physical ones.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think you as a Yu-Gi-Oh trader and myself as a longtime gamer, and I've spent more hours than I care to admit, saving digital assets and trading them with friends and all of that stuff. So yeah, for us, we're digital natives essentially, right? And so now the Web3 jump into being a Web3 native it wasn't much for me. But to your earlier point, or our earlier point around the gaming perspectives and the sentiments, I think that it's just an understanding of the technology that needs to get there before more gamers are really adopting it. So that's kind of my next question, actually, looking at the user acquisition piece. And you said that that is actually part of the offer that Stardust has, helping platforms essentially find new users, add new users. And it is incredibly important, right? Not just in the gaming space, but for Web3 projects in general. The user acquisition is kind of the big thing, the network effect.
Huge.
Basically, your Web3 platform isn't anything until you got like a certain number of users you can brag about. So how are you helping the gaming side of user acquisition? And what do you think, as a space, should we be doing more of to kind of help push the technology in the right direction?
Totally. And so if you look back at user acquisition, specifically in games, and I go back to 2008, 9, and 10, we had something called incentivized engagement, which is like, if you want to download my app, I will give you 10 cents, because the more people that download my app, I get ranked higher on the Apple App Store. And that's the best way to get organic players into my game. In blockchain today, and why I'm so bullish on gaming, everything that's old is new again. And we see these questing platforms, points platforms, gems, they're doing the exact same thing. Come play my game, come follow me on Twitter, come interact in my community. It'll bring more people in because nobody wants to be the second person and they all want to be the 10,000th, right? And I'll give you some reward. And so the user acquisition strategies we've seen in Web 2 gaming are playing out in Web 3 exactly the same. We had earn.com all the way back. Now we have Galaxy, Layer 3, Xterio, Pixelmon, lots of gaming launchpads. Coming, Earn Alliance, even more. One of the things that we do that separates us from the rest is we do programmatic user acquisition. And that's very different. So, $57 billion is spent every single year acquiring users to games. And the way that happens is when you're on TikTok or Twitter or Instagram, when you're scrolling through and you see a gaming advertisement, what actually has happened behind the scenes is a game is paying that platform some money to try and attract that you to play their game. And we are one of the advertisers behind the scenes that is programmatically understanding who these users are in Web3, which games would be best fits for them, and then allowing those games to actually come try and attempt to acquire those users to come into their ecosystems. And it's very different. A questing platform is great. And I suggest every game look into questing platforms, but they usually cap out about 50 to 100 to 150,000 monthly active users. If you really want to get into the millions, you have to go broader. You have to go programmatic. You have to get your ads and you have to showcase on TikTok to normal people, right? Who just want to play great games. And that's what we do. And we leverage that Web3 data set we have and all the rich data we know about Web3 games. We take it to Web2 players and we say, hey, these games are great fits for you. Would you like to come play them?
Mm-hmm. And when you do those outreaches, there's no mention of NFTs or blockchain or anything. It's really just, these are awesome games. Come check it out.
It's actually a great question. And we basically, our machine learning model on the back end ingests tons of creative. So, it could be 5 to 15 to even 50. And for context, a creative is a little ad you see. It could be a video. It could be a still. It could be a playable. We test many of them, and sometimes NFTs work in specific regions. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're digital collectibles. Sometimes they're nothing at all. You're just playing a great game.
Fun game, right?
Exactly. For different regions, for different price points, for different styles of user, for different styles of game, it is very different. And so it's something that we really work with our games to configure on what's the right messaging for them for the type of player they want to attract.
Amazing. And so when you're doing kind of the demographic breakdown of this data, right, and you're doing kind of obviously targeted ad campaigns, are you using blockchain data to kind of pull that together? Are you using data you just have from the market, 6 years plus or 6 years in the industry? What does that data look like? And the fact that you are able to nail down even regionally and what the preferences are by region says that you've got a pretty good global kind of view on things. But is there a blockchain component to that whole data analytics side of things?
100%. And every game is not going to be Web 3 and it's not going to be Web 2. We like to call it a sliding scale. There are games that are going to be Web 2.1 and there are games that are going to be 2.75. And one of the things actually in acquiring and understanding users in these games, and to your point, some of the users who withdraw from a custodial wallet into a MetaMask, or some users who have nothing and are just playing in the custodial wallet, understanding who those users are and who the right, when I say demographic is for your game, we actually can help you understand, are you a Web 2.6 game or a Web 2.25 game? And that is super duper important as it relates to you acquiring the right users for your game. And we take all the data we have, right? The Web 2 data, the Web 3 data, the blockchain data, the data we've gained over the past 6 years for different regions. And we help you understand who that perfect demographic is for you and help how to get that into your game.
Yeah, that's incredibly valuable, and we've been talking about Web 2.5 here quite a bit when looking at that conversation of adoption and quote unquote mass adoption, and will we ever get there? How do we get there? That's where that Web 2.5 point has come up before, and I like what you're talking about, even breaking it down more granular than that because of the data that you have. So that's pretty epic, pretty insane. So how are you feeling about the whole metaverse conversation? Right, I know in the last year Zuckerberg has kind of pivoted away from it, although I heard his earnings call had a lot of metaverse talk on it and the investors didn't like it. But yeah, I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of competing narratives around the metaverse conversation. I look at something like a sandbox, which is still kind of half open, you know, like if you own land there you can build in there, but the average person can't just jump in there and run around. Or voxels, which is my favorite corner of the metaverse, but it's incredibly quiet these days, and very low poly, you know, very super accessible. You can jump in on your phone, you know. And then there's Decentraland, which I think is actually, if there's one that's more active and more kind of actually incorporating events and having kind of corporate America or the corporate world more involved, I think Decentraland has done a pretty good job of that. And then there's Other Side, which, you know, had a huge promise and a whole lot of money invested in it, and you know, I haven't seen anything yet. So you know, I'm very disappointed, frankly, in the way that the metaverse has evolved from my falling in love with it back in 2021. But at the same time, I get that these things take time. So I'm just curious, you know, how you're viewing that kind of open world metaverse conversation as opposed to these, you know, more tailored specific games that are built out, which of course, you know, some would say is still part of the metaverse, of course, the whole digital world. But the real kind of like own your plot of land, have neighbors, trade your goods, that whole metaverse. How are you feeling about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a dichotomy between a huge digital realm, right, as we see, and pervasive digital identity. And I'll start by saying that pervasive digital identity, this is like, I have a MetaMask and I can take that to any one of those games you mentioned that are in the digital world, right? So one game and others are small experiences, but I have my own unique identity that I own and I can take around to each one of them. That, I think, is much more tangible, much easier to understand, and provides more direct benefit day one. And there's a lot easier to build because we already have all the infrastructure able to do that. It's clunky, of course. My grandma's not going to be part of it, unfortunately, but it's there. The other side, which is these large digital worlds, yeah, I got to be honest, I'm a little disappointed as well. You know, I think we all got a little high on our own supply, imagining that we would turn around and all live in Ready Player One tomorrow, which would be absolutely awesome, right? And I'm down for it. But there are so many things that we haven't even gotten to yet, right? We you know, the goggles are getting there. I believe Disney the other day, I saw a demo of them in their new Imagineering. Like they have this treadmill that can go in any which direction. You know, still think we're a little bit away, and by a little bit away, I mean about 20 years away from having a holodeck on the Star Trek. Well, I mean holodeck Star Trek Enterprise style, right? Okay, gotcha. From a digital world perspective, I think people have to think more about great game, and leveraging it into a digital world like Fortnite has become. Instead of just, I'm going to build a digital world and people are going to show up. And I think that's some of the mistake we made in blockchain, which was building these incredible projects, but without realizing how hard it is to get people into games, right? You know, to get a person to come play all day, every day, right, is not easy. People have lives, people have jobs, right? Yeah. They want a 5-minute game. To get them into a game that's going to consume for the rest of their lives, of which I play quite a few of them, is a lot harder than people expect. And so I think that we will see emergences of these, but they're going to have to take more of like the RuneScape and Second Life and EVE Online, like the World of Warcraft, like the kind of scrappiness. Let's get a game, let's get tons of players, and let's build out that world from the first block, right? Instead of let's build an incredibly large world and try and fill it up, right? Because if you take everybody in voxels and you fit them into a 10 by 10 square, and that was the whole world, it'd probably be pretty full. Right. But, you know, you build this incredibly large world and all of a sudden, you know, you have what I'd like to call the density problem, which is the same problem you see on Tinder. If you have one person in 10,000 different cities, one person per city, it's nothing. If you have 10,000 people in one city, that's everything. And I think digital worlds need to think more like that, create better communities because of it, and then expand from there.
Wow, amazing advice. Yeah, maybe cart before the horse kind of thing. And to your say, high on your own supply. I like that. We're definitely we're all ready for Ready Player One, but the tech is not quite there yet, I guess. So I did want to get a little bit of insights on, because I know you raised recently $35 million in funding. Congratulations. Just really interested in kind of you mentioned you've been around for 6 years now. You've been plugging away, head down. How important is the funding piece, and what advice could you give to other platforms or developers, or people that are out there maybe struggling, maybe only in their first year still, so maybe the funding's still a few years away, but a little bit of background on how you got to that space, and then how important is the funding, and how can others kind of maybe follow in your path? Anything around that?
Of course, and I will say the 36 million we've raised is actually over the lifetime of Stardust. Okay. So our last announced round was 30 million, still a lot, but I will say my first round 6 years ago was $100,000, and before that, it was the $20,000 I'd made on Bitcoin, and I transferred to the company's bank account. So we all start from the same place. It's like you go to the gym, right? Everybody starts by squatting the bar. There's no way around it, no matter how much you have today. And by the way, I love helping entrepreneurs. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, I'm Linder at Stardust.gg. Always happy to help out. Awesome. What I will say about raising a lot of money is, or a good amount of money, is your idea gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And a lot of people see raising money is more pathway to success. I will be honest, I will say raising more money means I stay up at night worrying about that I need to deliver on bigger expectations. And so I will say that we like to hold a lot of money raised on a platter and be like, this is the way to go. It's not always. So really define your own path, and don't get defined by those you've seen come before you. This is your business. This is your pathway. You may be able to get profitable with $500,000, and that may be better than raising 100. And so it's something for every entrepreneur to understand. What I will say, raising money is difficult. It is a painful process. It is a demoralizing process. And I want to bang my head against the wall just as much as the rest of you, no matter how successful or unsuccessful you are. And so what I'll say is you're going to get a lot of no's. My first round, and even my last round, I had well over 40 no's for 2 people that said yes, and then got a couple more yeses off the tail end of those. I will tell the story of I was out of money. After that 20K, it was not good. And I found an accelerator one day. I searched San Francisco Blockchain Accelerator, applied to the first 4 pages. It took me a whole week. Then I searched New York Accelerator, applied to the first 4 pages on Google. I typed blockchain angel investor, bought LinkedIn Premium, and DM'd over 300 people. Wow. And the one I ended up finding, the only one that responded and accepted me, was the 4th page of San Francisco Blockchain Accelerator, the first on the top, called Mousebelt. They're not around anymore, but dig every pile, dig under every rock, DM everybody on Twitter, reach out to your social network. I'm happy to be of help. Get every intro you can to an investor. Warm is definitely better than cold. But believe that if you work hard enough, you can make it happen. And, whether that's money in the bank, whether that's an understanding that this isn't the right business, whether it's an understanding that you need to keep at it, become profitable without any help from investors, you will succeed. And so keep at it, because every day I've wanted to quit for the last 6 years and one day. But what keeps me going is the belief of how big a business we're going to build in the future.
Let's go. That's so inspiring. That's amazing. Congrats. That's exactly what I was hoping you would say, just, yeah, it's not an easy thing. And to your point, maybe you don't need, as much money as you're aiming for. So actually understand why you need the money and how much money you'd be best equipped with. And to your other point, just keep trying, because it's not going to be an easy thing, right?
Yeah. Great. I see so many entrepreneurs make mistakes of trying to raise too much money. The average first round now is a couple $1 million. My first round was 100K. My second round was 350K. My third round was 500K. My fourth round was $1 million. And so from that perspective, figure out what you need to get to the next step of your project. Then times that by 1.5 or 1.75 and go ask for that amount of money, right? The other thing entrepreneurs don't, and sorry, I could just waffle on about this forever.
I love it.
When you ask for a certain amount of money, different funds consider you differently. And what I mean by that is there are 3 stages of funds. There are first funds, or just seed investors that are between 0 to 50 million. There are first to second time funds, which are between 75 to 150. And then there are big funds, 150 plus. And your lead check is going to be about 40 to 50% of your round size. And so if you're looking for money for the first time and you want to raise $5 million, you're going to need a $2.5 million check size. Multiply that by 40. You're looking for a fund that has between 75 to $125 million. Those funds are not typically looking to write very large checks into first-time founders or first-time companies. And so from that perspective, if you want probably somebody who fits your risk profile of between a $35 to $50 million fund, you divide that by 40, you're raising about $1 million to $2 million bucks. And so understand that if in your network you can talk to these investors and get a grasp for how they would think about your deal as contextualized to the size of check they're going to write, you'll get a good understanding of who you should target and not waste your time trying to raise too much money, but only raise that amount of money when you're ready for it.
Amazing advice. I appreciate that. And I'm guessing you might have some people taking you up on that offer to help entrepreneurs. So I appreciate it. That's amazing. So I know we're hitting the hour mark here. I got a couple quick questions, hopefully before we wind down. I am curious on your thoughts on how we kind of push back against just the crypto reputation in general. To your point, maybe it's just a matter of time. But, and I guess also just advertising games without maybe mentioning the crypto is another way to just leapfrog over that conversation. But I am curious, do you think it's important that gamers have a more appreciation of crypto and the value that it brings to the space? And if so, how do we push that narrative forward and kind of push back against the FUD?
Gamers love to scream and yell. I don't know what it is. I've never seen a community that is more up in arms about progress than game developers and gamers. It's quite funny. But going back, look, free games, people yelled, why are the games free now? They should, game developers are going to go out of business if they're free. Then they have DLC, like, oh no, I have to buy things. Oh, I didn't get a great game for free. Oh no, that I'm on mobile. The screen is so small, games are going to die. What's going on? Gamers love to scream. In fact, I've never been more bullish that people are bearish on blockchain games. Makes me bullish for the future of them. Because every time we've seen true innovation, it's like, 10% of the community, this is fucking awesome, this is the future. The other 90% being like, what on earth is this? And so, again, it goes back to the chain decision. I think every game needs to showcase their game in different ways. Sometimes the blockchain is going to be the feature and not the bug. Sometimes the blockchain is going to be the bug, and you want to put it away, and it's not the feature. The feature is a great collectible game. And so I think every game is different and how it wants to showcase itself, but I will say, don't be afraid to own it, right? That can be the best thing you've ever done because it can get players in your game that truly love your game for what it is rather than something you're not being transparent about with them.
1000%. Amazing. Yeah, I love it. That's what I lean more towards. But to your point, know your audience, know your target demo, and go that way as well. But definitely, I'm all for owning it and really promoting the value of Web3 and the value of the crypto. So that's amazing. Curious on the security piece, is there a special way that you kind of have to handle the security of these custodial wallets or just your technology in general? How do you tackle kind of the security question around the wallets as a service?
Of course. So I go back to the money transmitter licenses we have, right? This is the highest level of regulation you can get. Stripe, Coinbase, every bank that holds hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, we have that same regulation. PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, Robinhood, we all do. And that is the highest level of value you can get from a regulatory standing. They look at everything from your security model to your data privacy to your business model and making sure you're truly protecting consumers. And we keep ourselves at the top of our game, and we want to be synonymous with the biggest players in the industry, and we have the same regulatory backing as them. And that's why, you know, when gaming and blockchain continues to take off, we're going to be as large as them as well, because we've thought about this, but the security of every user, every game developer on our platform, and have done more than the bare minimum, but actually go to the federal government and gain approval for what we're doing.
Kudos to you. That's amazing. Oh man. And looking at like just the nuts and bolts of the piece, is it essentially like not your keys, not your crypto thing? You have all the keys very securely stored. And then when it comes to transferring it from the custodial wallet, obviously you just have to know what you're doing essentially, and you do it the same way you would kind of with an art NFT or something.
Yeah, so we actually own no keys. They're all generative, right? So we don't hold keys. You know, game developers who've dug into this, even the auditors of quite a few states have, right? Like we hold no plain text keys ever. They're all generative, and there's no way for even within Stardust for anyone to derive your actual key, and that's so important.
That's huge. That's huge. I always thought it'd be like a two-party thing when it comes to these custodial wallets.
No, it's much more advanced, and everybody from Stripe to Coinbase to Amazon to Apple to Google, everybody and Facebook holding these private keys across the globe for their different services, you know, ascribe to the same quality of value that we do for security.
Amazing. Well, I'm hella impressed, and I am very grateful for this interview opportunity. I think all of our listeners are going to get a lot of value out of this, especially those that are in the gaming space, maybe some developers out there, and just really eager to see where you go from here, frankly. And maybe we'll get you back on the show in the future and be able to kind of talk about where Web3 gaming is in the next bull run when it's really going crazy. It seems like we're gearing up for something there. So I'm just curious, you know, what's next for yourself and Stardust? Anything you're really excited about this year, 2024, around the corner before we wind up?
2024 is a big year for us. You know, we have been a complete infrastructure company to date, but in building a effective user acquisition product, we've started to understand some of the issues with native Web2 user acquisition, specifically around the ad networks of today. AppLovin just posted one of its most profitable quarters ever, $1 billion in revenue, $550 million EBITDA. Wow. Unity ads, ironSource, Facebook, Google ads. They're making so much money, and game developers are not doing well in Web 2 on average, right? You have Scopely and Monopoly Go, but that's like, you know, an outlier of the outlier. Overall, there's a ton of consolidation in the user acquisition space. And one of the big things for this year is how can we potentially build a better model, something that gives back some of that intrinsic hundreds of billions of dollars of value that game developers and app developers are contributing to the underlying ad networks today, back to those that are making it so valuable, instead of cut in these, you know, and held in these centralized entities that just use it to pad their bottom line. And so it's something we're thinking about, and you'll be hearing a lot more of that in the next 3 to 6 months from us.
Awesome. So really taking that on-chain data and all the demographics you were mentioning and really kind of honing it into a very clear ad software ad kind of offering for gaming companies specifically. Yeah.
100%.
Amazing. Well, congrats, Canaan. That's wow. On to bigger and better things, even though you have so much to hang your hat on already. It's quite impressive.
I love it. You know, you only go up here, and you know, again, you run a company, you know, you always have, you know, people chasing you. And so you got to innovate. And, you know, it's one of the most rewarding things, one of the most stressful things, but one of the best things you'll ever do.
Amazing. That's super exciting. We'll be watching. I want to thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning into Web3 Warriors. And until next time, we'll catch you all in the metaverse. Peace out.